we've already covered next month's meeting, so I hope you come to that as well. Today, we have with us Joyce Held, who's an officer of the Pownal Historical Society. She's got interested in the story of the widow Krieger, a Revolutionary era woman from Pownal, and she spent over 10 years researching this woman and trying to find out a lot of detail about her and her family. And I'll turn it over to Joyce now and let you learn about the widow Krieger and her witchcraft trial.
First of all, I have to turn on this mic, she says, for my recorder. Let's see. It's working.
Talk right into the mic. Talk into the mic.
And then I do all these wonderful things. Everybody else here?
Or if you want to speak at the, here they come on. It's okay.
Yep, now I'm here.
Now you can hear me. We'll make this work. We struggle with it. You want to use the microphone?
I can just use it.
Okay, that's all. That would be fun. One last thing. Wind stopper. All right, let's just see now.
Okay. All right, hang in there with me. Yes. All right, I just want to make sure that I have this ready. Yep, okay. All right. Now, I think I'm almost ready. My husband would say, the car is running. I'm like, oh no, I'm almost ready. Hang in there. Okay.
Here we go.
So, first of all, thank you all for coming. I really appreciate the group out here. This is great. And as a member of the Pownal Historical Society, I would like to all of you to come visit when we do events, because our turnout isn't as grand as yours. So maybe it's the witch, I don't know. But anyway. So anyway, today we're talking about Margaret Krieger. And Margaret, like Meredith was saying, she got under my skin there about more than 10 years ago. I started researching her, and over the years, Marguerite, and who later became Margaret, has become an adopted ancestor of mine. And you can adopt ancestors. I proved it. So I know more about Marguerite and her family than I do, I think, my own family, who my husband and I have been researching for over 50 years. Yeah, because I was like 10 years old when we started. Oh, just kidding. But anyway, so here we go. So the story of Margaret Krieger. Let me see if I can push this to go the right way. Here we go. Okay. Now, witch. A person thought to have magic powers, especially evil ones, popularly depicted as a woman wearing a black cloak, pointed hat, flying on a broomstick. Well, first of all, I've got to say that Margaret Krieger was innocent, so she never wore a pointed hat. Unfortunately for Margaret, she did wear black a lot because she did lose some very close friends and relatives and what have you over the years. So she was a lot of wearing mourning clothes, so it would be black, but no pointy hat. Okay, and no broomstick. So that's what you're expecting. I'm sorry. So I'm going to take my hat off so I can read. So, how to identify a witch? Now, amongst us right now, there are probably witches, I hate to tell you. You can't pick them out. There's absolutely no real world indicator or method to identify a witch. But historical methods were, excuse me, that identified witches were based on baseless fears and superstitions, suspected which would be subject to tests by the judge. They would also check the person's body for devil's mark, such as moles or insensitive skin. The moles might, unfortunately for anybody that had one on their nose, that would be really bad. But these methods were not dependable, and they led to unjust persecution of many innocent people. And whenever I do a presentation, and it always, thank goodness, starts with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, that last sentence always hits home to me, justice for all. Please, let's all remember that last sentence and live it. So, let's see what happens. Okay, folklore. Now, we all have been subject to folklore. Folklore is the traditional beliefs, customs, and stories of a community passed through the generations by word of mouth. Krieger settled a little north of the rock. Now this is the folklore that I was reading way back when that made me think I need to know more. Okay, so this is a little bit of folklore that I stumbled upon more than 10 years ago. Krieger settled a little north of the rocks, which bears his name. A very good story, the truth of which we do not vouch, is told of his wife, who, from testimony of his neighbors, was an extraordinary woman. All women are extraordinary, just so you want to know. This, of course, brought upon her the envy and suspicion of good people, and in after years, when witchcraft prevailed, her husband had gone to his long rest. She was accused of being a witch and brought before a committee, appointed to a judge and dispense justice. In such cases, that's what they were set up to do. But after reviewing the grounds of the accusation and consulting the evidence of the case, they deferred a direct decision and required that she be subject to one of two tests in order that they might better determine the point of witchery. Okay? So there were two that they could use to find out if she truly was a witch. Test number one, well, they could have her climb a tree, and if upon cutting it down, she was not killed, she was a witch, otherwise not. Okay, all right, you caught on, right? That's a lose-lose situation. So the second test would be that they would cut a hole in the ice on the river, sufficient to let her body through, and if upon trial she sunk to the bottom, an acquittal should be granted. If she floated, the penalty of the law should be visited upon her. After some deliberation, they adopted the latter test, and poor woman was obliged to undergo the process of sinking, which of course she did. With much effort, she was saved from drowning. She was one of the fortunate ones, and allowed to go free, with the wise conclusion of the judge that if she had been a witch, the powers of infernal would have supported her. Or she knew how to float, but okay. So who was Widow Krieger? That was my question when I read that and thought, what the heck? Who is this lady that went through this horrible thing in North Pownal, Vermont? Of course, it wasn't, it was a different world then. But so this is the story of Margaret Schumacher Krieger, accused witch of Pownal, Vermont, victim of Vermont's only witch trial. And I can't repeat it often enough. Margaret was not a witch. Margaret was a daughter, a wife, a mother, a grandmother, a believer, a strong believer in God that didn't deserve this, totally didn't deserve this. Now, Margaret Schumacher was born April 24th, 1724 in Williamstown, Massachusetts, to Peter and Schumacher. On February 9, 1741, she married Johann Uri Krieger, who was 14 years her senior. She was just barely 17. Johann was an early settler of land at East Rensselaerwick Manor that would eventually become Pownal, Vermont. Johann Uri and Margaret Krieger's home was number 129 on the map. It's about a mile north of Johann's gristmill. Now let me see if I can. Well, can y'all see the heart right there on the screen? That's where 129 is. Okay? Was. A life of hardship and faith. And boy, did she have it. Johann's mill stood near what would become known as Krieger Rocks. And if any of you ever ride through North Pownal, going someplace, I don't know where you go driving through North Pownal, but you'll see Krieger Rocks across from the Hoosick River. It's on the east side of the Hoosick. They had 3 sons, John George, Peter, and William. Marguerite, as well as the sons as they grew, helped Johann maintain the farm, the mill, and the home in an era of tough frontier life. Indian raids, wars, had them returning to Williamstown and family for safety many times. It was amazing back then. You know, I'm sure you all know that Pownal is right on the line of Williamstown, Mass. And it's just absolutely amazing how that line was between safety and risk of death. I mean, it's just, you know, that it's a fort, you know, there's people that protect you. But when you were over on the Pownal side, you were on your own, fighting bears and Indians, I hate to say that, Native American raids and what have you. But anyway, loss and accusation. In the 1770s, tragedy struck the Krieger family. First, her son Peter died at age 27 in 1770, and in 1772. Then their younger son, William, died at the Battle of Bennington in 1777 at the age of 29. So they had 3 sons, and they lost 2 of them in their 20s. I've never been able to find out what happened to Peter, but Peter and his brothers, when they got of age, they were invited to come to Williamstown, Massachusetts to build mills for them, and they were given land down there. So, as a matter of fact, they built multiple mills, and it was called Krieger Mills in Williamstown, Massachusetts. And, you know, they learned from their dad, obviously. And so I tend to think that maybe Peter died in an accident. I don't know. I have not found out. But I'll keep you informed. So, but then for William, he goes off to the Battle of Bennington, and he gets killed, and he has a small, very young family. He has a baby that's just months old. So with the arrival of the, and you can see over there on the side, it shows where William Krieger was killed. And, that was just a little piece of the list of soldiers that were killed during the Battle of Bennington. So you see William Krieger there. And notice how the name is spelled. Krieger is spelled so many different ways. Oh, it's just unreal. But her tombstone is Kriger. So when I started, I was doing the IE, which is the English pronunciation and spelling. I'm trying so hard to call her Marguerite Krieger with, you know, Kriger, rather than Margaret, because when the English came, Johann Uri became John George, you know, Marguerite became Margaret. And I just really wanted them to have their real, true identity known. So, with the arrival of the English settlers around 1762, and as I said there, their names were changed, the English names of John and Margaret. In 1785, John passed away, or Johann Uri, leaving Margaret, leaving Margaret as the widow Krieger, a grieving woman. Shortly after, Margaret faced accusations of witchcraft, a claim rooted in greed and fear rather than fact. And then we'll just go through the trial just a little. Margaret's accuser said she was an extraordinary woman. Fear of the unknown, tensions from the Revolutionary War, and the isolation of rural life in a new world contribute to the spread of rumors. In all fairness to the English, you know, they came, they spoke proper English. They were with, you know, people speaking German, people speaking Dutch. You know, you can imagine, you don't know what they're saying. You know, there's a lot of suspicion and a lot of rumors and what have you. So, somebody's doing something, you think, well, what are they doing that for, or whatever. Despite the charges, there was no evidence against her, and the judge put her to the water test. She passed and was acquitted. But the damage to her reputation and spirit was undeniable. Now remember, Margaret was just, you know, trying to take care of William's family. She moved back right after William was killed. She moved back to Williamstown to help her daughter-in-law, Margaret, take care of the little ones. And she had a granddaughter, Margaret, who she was very, very close with. And it was, you know, she was a grandmother, just like any of us grandmas would do. If somebody needs us, we're there, you know, in a heartbeat. So her final years and legacy. Well, Margaret lived out her final years with William's children in Williamstown, Mass. And she died in 1790 at the age of 66. Now that's pretty doggone young, if you ask me, because, you know, for all she went through. She left her estate to her son, John, who was the only one left, and his family, and to William's children. And this really impressed me when I found her will and I read her will, the fact that she wrote up this will and she signed it, and you can see the M down there. That was her mark, a big, bold M. I could just, every time I see it, I can feel her writing that, like, you know, this is what I want. I think she was a very, very strong woman. So her story has become a symbol of resilience against injustice, justice for all. On September 16th, 2023, myself, with the Pownal Historical Society, and Jamie Franklin from the Bennington Museum, unveiled a marker in remembrance of the widow Krieger witch trial. The marker was sponsored by the Vermont Folk Life Center and the William C. Pomeroy Foundation. So that stands right at the North Pownal Bridge, right by the Hoosick River. Now, our annual community remembrance, the Pownal Historical Society is working to ensure widow Margaret Krieger's story is never forgotten. Always remembered quickly, I guess is what I want to say. Witches' Walk and community gatherings are held in remembrance of her. And I don't know who those two people are up there, but they had a great time. And I normally do not carry a broom because she wasn't a witch. But we're all heading now over to the lawn of the park, and we had dancers performing the broom dance. And somebody gave me a broom to do the broom dance. Needless to say, I wasn't out of the picture too long when the broom got put down and I didn't dance. I leave it up to the people who don't worry about throwing something out when they do that. So, why was Margaret Krieger accused of being a witch? Now that's the question. I think I have the answer. We may never know, but after speaking with a descendant of Marguerite and hearing that his family talked of a family witch and a possible land dispute, I tend to believe that greed was the underlying reason. Johann had arrived in the 1730s, traveling up the Hudson River with a small group in search of a new land. He established himself on the east side of the vast Rensselaerswyck Manor. There he built his homestead, cleared and improved the land, and constructed a mill. His industrialness gave it to a small settlement near what would become known as Krieger Rocks, once called Kriegerville, a community of like-minded settlers farming and building together. By 1760, the political wind had shifted. Under the New Hampshire grants, Dutch settlers were labeled squatters and pressured to abandon their land. Johann resisted fiercely, acting for himself and 9 others, including his son Peter and his brother-in-law Michael. He petitioned Governor Benningworth for legal title to the lands that they had improved, boasting fields, a grain, and 6 working mills. God bless those squatters, huh? The proprietors voted to grant Johann his 200 acres, though it's uncertain if all of the others received the same. His victory may have bred resentment, especially among the land-hungry neighbors. So when Johann died in 1785, Margaret became widow Krieger. Not long afterwards, she was accused of witchcraft. Makes one think it was more about greed, a convenient way to seize her valuable land. So, who was the widow Krieger? Okay, here we go. Born to German immigrants, married, she was 16, she was barely 17, I think, to a 30-year-old farmer, gristmill owner, from a sparsely settled, rugged area, mother of 3 sons by 21, who faced the conflict and tensions between European settlers and Native Americans, as well as by tensions between the British and the French during the French-Indian War, 1754 to 1763, always on high alert for raids while working hard with her husband and sons to tame the wilderness and to create a home while facing threats from both nature and human conflicts. Suffered the loss of her young son Peter, only to have her son William killed in the Revolutionary War at the Battle of Bennington just 5 years later, leaving a young wife and babies. Moving in to help the young widow with the babies while she was grieving her own loss. Cared for her sick husband till his death in 1785, and then faced accusations of being a witch and forced to face the water test. Here's a proclamation. A proclamation in honor of widow Margaret Krieger. I decided to do a proclamation for her. Whereas Margaret Krieger was accused not of sorcery, but of being an extraordinary woman, and whereas we recognize today that Marguerite was indeed extraordinary, a symbol of resilience whose legacy is one of strength, perseverance, courage, and determination. And whereas the true power Marguerite carried were not from the devil, but from her deep love of God and family. Whereas her life reminds us that the injustices of yesterday still echo in the injustices of today. Now, therefore, we proclaim and affirm that Marguerite Krieger shall be remembered as an extraordinary woman with extraordinary powers, a beacon of faith, courage, and enduring spirit. May her story inspire us all to raise our voices and declare with courage and conviction, enough. All right, now says, thank you for, before I say thank you, I'll say thank you. I did write a poem about her, and if you have time and patience, I'd like to read it to you. It's not 19 pages long. I wrote this to read at the Witches' Walk, which we have, and that's to remember Margaret and what she went through, to celebrate strong, resilient people, to encourage understanding to people who might speak differently than you, maybe dress differently, look differently than you, whatever it is, let's get rid of the prejudice and let's look with the inside, the spirit. So this is what I read on September 13th. Words to Widow Krieger. In the valley where the Hoosic winds, by the rocks where the river bends, lived a woman strong and kind, with a heavy heart and steadfast mind. They called her Widow Krieger then, alone but standing tall again. Through loss and storms she held her ground, till the whispering fear came round. O Widow Krieger, hear our song, you were brave though they did you wrong. The river knows, the mountains cry, truth will stand through these years, though the years roll by. She raised her voice by the miller's stone, but death took two, left her alone. A healer's touch, a midwife's hand, misunderstood in a trembling land. They cast their stones with coward's breath. Afraid of life, they danced with death. Bound and tossed in the water deep, freezing the tears that she did weep. They thought they'd break her with their trial, but her story lived across the miles. Now we gather, proud and free, to honor her memory. She was innocent, pure and true. The fire they feared was the strength in you. Widow Krieger, your name will stay. We walk for you this very day. And I ended it with, remember, we are the grandchildren of the women they couldn't burn. And then I said, let the witches walk again. So I do want to thank you all for your interest in Margaret's story. And remember, when we stand together, we're strong. And when we speak up as one, we're not as a whisper, but we're a roar to be reckoned with. Blessings. Thank you.
Questions, please. Questions. I love questions. Go ahead.
Do we have any rules to let this committee of judges, how did they form a committee to judge her?
Back then, there wasn't really law and order amongst the frontier lands. A small spot like Pownal didn't have a police force or anything like that. They had safety committees. That's what they were called, a safety committee. So anything that, there was a sign group, and anything that came up, be it somebody stole your cow or whatever it may be, it would go before the safety committee. And so this accusation was brought before the safety committee. And it would be, 3 or 4 people from the town. Pardon?
When you say people, you mean men of the town?
Yes, definitely yes.
How old was she when they did the water test?
Well, it was 1785, and she died at 66 in 1790, so 61? Yeah, 61. She was quite young, yeah. Which, to me, she was quite young. Back then, 60s was probably old age by then, yeah. So, yes, sir.
It begs the question of what role does sexuality play in witchcraft?
What did you say? Try that again.
What role does sexuality play?
Well, there were men that were accused of being witch. Yeah, there were men. But the percentage, 98% were, women. I have my own theory. I have my theory about the fact that, this sounds like I'm being sexist, but I'm not. I really respect men and their strength and their courage, and I've been married to my husband for 62 years, and so endurance. He has endured living with me all these years. But I really think that over our lifetime, over the lifetime of Margaret, women were feared. I really do believe they were feared. We women, to this day, I think are feared. I really do. I think that there are those that recognize the fact that our voices carries a lot of weight. We don't even know it ourselves, but our voices carry a lot of weight. Our voices are the voices that calms a crying baby. Our voices soothes a sick person. Our voices, we speak up. We're heard. And we're afraid that we're going to speak up and be heard. And I look out at you and I bet every one of you knows somebody that has been told to keep quiet over the course of a lifetime. Maybe it was they were touched inappropriately and they were told not to say anything, or it just let the man take care of it. The wife or the woman didn't have a say. And I've seen us evolve into being a little more forthright in how we feel. I still think we have to evolve a little more. I think we have to get a little. I think right now, our whole world is begging us to speak up, be kind, bring us back to being nice to each other. Yeah.
Did she get to keep all the land?
No. I think she just plain decided enough is enough. And she had her family in Williamstown. She had those children. And she went back and she lived with William's children and, took care of them, helped raise them. Her will was beautiful. I don't have it with me, but it's kind of long, but it was a grandmother's love letter to her grandchildren, which she gave, and the Bible in Dutch language. She had some sheep. She gave sheep to the children. Her aprons to her granddaughter Margaret. It was just, and that's the thing. I want to get it across to her, but she was a person. She was a person. So. Yes, ma'am.
Where did she live in Williamstown?
The exact spot, I'm not sure. I think it was on the west end. She's buried in West Lawn Cemetery in Williamstown. We visit her grave, and Johann and Peter's buried there, and a couple of the grandchildren. I'm pretty sure it was on the west side. And like I said, if you're familiar with Pownal, you come up and you can actually go into Williamstown on Northwest Hill Road, and the cemetery, and it's all there. And I think that, she was buried in her neighborhood.
Do you have a physical address for the mill, the area where?
I have not pinpointed exactly where the mill was. It was close to, it was in North Pownal. It was below Krieger Rocks, so that narrows it down. Future mills have been on that spot, which I think they used and improved the dam that he had started, because it was a cotton mill. It was most recently it was the tannery on that spot. So it was in that area exactly, yeah. And so that's why we put the sign right there on the corner of the bridge, and it's in the park where. The tannery, but they made out of the property of the tannery was on. So, yeah, so it's pretty close. Yeah. And the house, it says the house was a mile north, and about a mile north. I haven't figured out which house that is, because the homes were incorporated. If there was anything left, a house was built around it. We found that in Pownal, North Pownal. The kitchen was like, of a house now, might have been the home then, Yeah. Yeah, they just built around it. And you say, oh, that's not old. And then you start doing back, say, well, that kitchen is, or, you know.
Look at all the additions.
That's right, that's right.
Century.
Yes, definitely. So. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Was there any, did you find out anything about how she survived being put down in the hole in the ice?
Well, back then, and I don't know if they did this with her or not, but back then, when they would put a person in and put them to the water trial, they would tie a rope around their waist because they didn't want to have to go fetch a dead body downstream. Okay? So they watched, but of course it was wintertime, so they cut the hole when she went down. And, you know, folklore again said that she sunk like a rock. Okay? And she started to go, you know, downstream. And fortunately, there was enough people there that when they said she sunk, everybody grabbed the rope and they were able to pull her back and pull her out. Yeah, so she was fortunate. Yeah. Anybody else? So I thank you kindly. You're a great group.
Please join us for refreshments.